What was the nature of the Hermetic wisdom that came to us from ancient Egypt? What were its foundations? What secrets was it trying to conceal or reveal? The word Hermetic means to be secretly sealed. The Hermetic traditions of ancient Egypt, with its curious hieroglyphics, mute statues, ubiquitous temples, and its imposing but silent pyramids, remain a mystery in this so-called modern age. These traditions are a mystery to us because modern archaeology and modern Egyptology do not have the Gnostic keys required to decode the spiritual symbolism that was purposely embedded within every aspect of that glorious civilization. In this presentation, we will look to break some of those seals in order to provide you with a better idea of the power and beauty behind the Hermetic traditions of ancient Egypt and its focus on spiritual development and initiation. There is an order to the universe. This order is called cosmos. Cosmos is a Greek word that means order, good order, orderly arrangement. Tens of thousands of years ago, the ancient Egyptians expressed this order in their cosmology via myths, allegories, and a pantheon of gods. These gods, as they have come to be known, were none other than the Elohim. We can also call them cosmocrators. This unified hierarchy of gods were the demiurge, highly evolved spiritual entities who are charged with administering the creation according to the divine plan of the Logos. The foundation of their divine cosmology was based upon the number 7. We find hierarchies of sevenfold planes and domains in the Hindu, Greek, Theosophical, and Rosicrucian cosmological systems, among other spiritual traditions. The ancient Greek symbol of the Ouranos was known by the ancient Egyptians as Ouranus. This symbol represented the creative idea of the cosmos, segregating and ensouling a portion of space in order to provide a sphere of development for divine life. As Hermes has stated, and I paraphrase here, things that have motion must be contained within that which is immovable. Within this sphere of divine life, the universe was essentially held to be an emanation of successive divine principles. The gods of the Egyptians embodied these cosmic principles and projected discrete cosmic domains from their own essence. The ancient Egyptians held that our cosmos was brought into being by the great god Ra. Ra was organized into 7 principles of cosmic being. Each plane of cosmic existence was ensouled by one of these 7 Ra principles. Each cosmic plane contained a solar state that was also divided into 7 subplanes. These 7 cosmic domains embody a progression from pure spirit to the densest forms of matter, which is crystallized spirit. The lowest plane is the 7th cosmic domain, our physical realm, which is ensouled by the atom Ra principle. Here we have a closer look at the 7 subdivisions of the 7th cosmic domain, which was called the Underworld by the ancient Egyptians. The ancient Egyptians clearly recognized the concept of the divine spark, which they named the Akh, A-K-H. They saw the Akh, or divine spark, as a fragment of divine spirit. The fall of man, as we refer to it, was not characterized by the ancient Egyptians as the result of disobedience or error. It was held to be a planned emanation of groups of virgin divine sparks, purposely sent forth to individualize and descend through cosmic planes of increasingly lower vibrations. After gathering experiences in these lower domains, the individualized sparks would gradually reunite and return, rich with experience, to the divine realms from which they had descended. The ancient Egyptian names for the multiple bodies of the human being and their associated God principles are identified as follows. The Sa is the spirit soul body and was associated with the Osiris principle. The Ba is the soul body, the astral body, and was associated with the Isis principle. The Ka is the etheric double, the vital body, and its associated God principle was the goddess Nephthys. And finally, there was the Khat, which is the name for the physical body and was associated with Set. Ancient Egypt was the expression on earth of the order in heaven above. Ancient Egypt was situated along the banks of the Nile River and was divided into two parts. There was Upper Egypt, which extended south from Memphis to Khartoum, and then there was Lower Egypt, which extended north from Memphis to the Nile Delta. We are reminded here that the ancient Egyptians used direction as a vital part of their symbolisms. The northern direction was always associated with rebirth into the physical world, while the southern direction was associated with a return to the divine worlds. Also, leftwards, downwards, and eastwards were always associated with the material world and mortality, while rightwards, upwards, and westwards were all indications of spiritual development and immortality. Because the ancient Egyptians held that the southerly direction always represented the path of spiritual development, references to upper and lower appear to be reversed when looking at a map like this. So sometimes it helps to flip the map. The geography of the Nile represented many things. The cosmic and solar schemes, the heavens, stages of spiritual advancement, the initiatory path, the chakra system of the human being. The Nile River flows from south to north, mostly downhill, until it empties into the Mediterranean Sea. At 7 points along the path of the Nile River, cataracts appear. In geological terms, cataracts are shallow sections of a river that serve to decrease the force with which the river flows. Each cataract represented a division of the 7 cosmic planes of being. Each cataract also represented one of the 7 main chakras of the human being. This is what the 7 cataracts look like. The 7th and final cataract was formed by the junction of the so-called Blue and White Nile rivers that merged to form the source of the Nile and represented the cosmic principle of duality. Here we can see why these two rivers were called the Blue and White Nile rivers. It has been suggested that these cataracts were not natural formations, but were intentionally engineered for the express purpose of using this river to represent certain cosmological and metaphysical concepts. Found along the east and west banks of the Nile River were the Nome districts. The Nome districts were administrative and spiritual centers. There were 42 Nome districts present along the length of the Nile River. Upper Egypt had 22 nome districts, while Lower Egypt had 20 nome districts. The nomes symbolize progressive planes of consciousness throughout the underworld, the seventh cosmic domain. If we looked at the key of 7, we find the following correspondences. 7 cosmic domains with 42 subplanes, 7 chakras, 42 plexuses, 7 cataracts, plus 42 nome districts equals 49. The classically esoteric 7 times 7. The nome temples were impressive edifices. The importance of a temple to its nome district was analogous to that of a modern cathedral. Within the interior of any particular nome temple, the architecture, inscriptions, and statuary all spoke to the overall theme or purpose of the temple. The ancient Egyptian language was an agglutinative language. Agglutinative means that sounds and meanings, called morphemes, are chained together to form words. The individual morphemes retain their original meaning, but are combined to form a new word or concept. Let's take a couple of examples. Desk and top are two words that have their own meanings, but when combined form a new word, desktop. We'll take one more, sun and flower. Two words again that have their own meaning, but when combined form a new word. Here are a couple of examples of this agglutination in the ancient Egyptian language. Kem is the name for ancient Egypt. The morpheme k equals spirit. M equals group. So kem equals spirit group. You can try another. Ak, which we learned was the name for the divine spark earlier. The letter A at the beginning of any word in the ancient Egyptian language always meant detached from, emanate from, away from. We know as spirit. So A equals a fragment of spirit, a divine spark. Let's try one more. Amenti. The letter A at the beginning of a word means detached from, emanates from. Men equals the universal mind principle. T equals heaven world or domain. So Amenti translates as detached from the mind heaven. Amen equals emanates from universal mind. Headdresses. There are 3 headdresses that the ancient Egyptians used to symbolize various states of dominion over the higher and lower natures. Deshret is the name of the red crown of Lower Egypt. The red crown represented material existence in the lower underworld, physical, desire, and lower mental planes. Hedjet, the white crown, symbolized Upper Egypt and spiritual life in the higher underworld, the Atma, Buddhi, higher mental planes. Beshent was the name given to the double crown. When the 2 crowns were worn together, it represented that the initiate had successfully reunited the lower material nature with the higher spiritual nature. This symbolism has been referred to as the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, but it has nothing to do with a physical unification of geographic portions of Egypt. It is purely symbolic. You will often see images of statues where the figure has its hands folded across the chest, holding a crook, which is a shepherd's tool, and a flail, a scourge or a whip. The crook represents attraction. The flail represents repulsion. Attraction and repulsion are the opposing poles of desire. When the crook and flail were crossed over the heart, it signified that the desires of the individual were at rest. The individual, the initiate, had balanced the emotions and established rulership over the desire nature. Once again, this symbolism had little to do with actual pharaohs and everything to do with an important stage of the initiatory process. You will sometimes see statues where the figure has one foot extended slightly forward. Usually it is the left foot. There is a symbolism behind this. The ancient Egyptians were very precise in what they wanted to convey, right down to the smallest detail. This statue is called the Menkaure Initiate. Menkaure is the middle figure and is wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt. Remember, this represents spiritual consciousness. To his right is the goddess Hathor, and to his left is an unidentified gnome goddess. Hathor's left foot is positioned slightly forward, symbolizing the beginning of forward movement by the initiate's spiritual nature. The left foot of the initiate is positioned even further forward, indicating confidence and determination at the beginning of the path. Perhaps this is where we get the expression of putting one's best foot forward. Menkaure represents the candidate who is preparing to take the first of 7 initiations. Double statuary also carried its own symbolism. This statue in Karnak has been erroneously labeled as Ramesses II and Nefertiti. This is because archaeologists do not possess the proper keys or are reluctant to speculate outside of the mainstream scholarship on ancient Egypt. This double statue represents the divine self of the initiate, hence the titanic size, and the transfigured personality that has become one with the spirit soul. When you see this type of double statuary, remember that the smaller statues do not represent sons or daughters, but rather some spiritual principle or concept. Notice here that the smaller statue, representing the liberated initiate, stands on the feet of the larger statue, which represents the divine self. The implication here is that the liberated personality now symbolically walks in the footsteps of the divine self. Abu's symbol is an important temple complex that lies beyond the seventh cataract. Within its interior chambers, statues of 12 god figures are used to represent a triple progression, the triple cycle of man, which is involution, the descent from divinity into matter, the nadir, the experience in matter, evolution, the ascent from matter, and the return to divinity. The first 4 god figures on the left are wearing only the crown of Upper Egypt, symbolizing spiritual consciousness. Remember, the left side always represents the material realm. Thus, these god figures represented a descent into the underworld by the divine spiritual consciousness of man, the involutionary path. The 4 figures on the right side of the chamber, the right side representing spiritual development, are all wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, symbolizing an ascent to divinity by the liberated initiate after having merged the lower terrestrial consciousness with the divine spirit consciousness. This is the evolutionary path. In the inner chamber, the 4 seated figures are roughly the size of a human being and symbolize the nadir, man's material experience. From left to right, the figures represent Ptah, the unknowable logos of this system, Lord of the darkness, Lord of chaos. Amun-Ra, the fallen mind spark of the unknowable logos. The human being. This figure symbolizes the terrestrial human being. This is not Ramesses II. The figure bears no facial resemblance to known images of Ramesses II. It is a representation of the human being. And finally, Ra-Harakti, which is the principle of awakening or reborn semi-divine consciousness. This is the Horus nature in man. Finally, we come to Giza. The Giza Plateau was where the final initiations took place. There is a purposeful symbolism that is present in the layout of Giza. We will focus here on the symbolism of the 10 pyramids on the Giza Plateau. The Giza Plateau was divided into two plains. The upper half, or northern half, symbolized spirit, while the lower, or southern half, symbolized matter. There are three main pyramids. Menkaure is the smallest of the three main pyramids and symbolized the terrestrial soul. Khafre, the middle pyramid, represents the spirit soul, which is held to be a mediator between God consciousness, symbolized by the Great Pyramid, and human consciousness, symbolized by the Menkaure pyramid. The Great Pyramid, Khufu, symbolized the divine soul. There are also 7 minor pyramids. The Menkaure pyramid represented the purely human entity, and its 3 subsidiary pyramids symbolized the physical, astral, and lower manas aspects of the terrestrial human being. Khafre's single minor pyramid represented the evolving new soul, and the 3 minor pyramids of the Great Pyramid represented the Atma, Buddhi, upper manas aspects of the higher consciousness. There are 7 initiations that take place within these 7 subsidiary pyramids. It is hoped that what you have seen will reveal to you that there was a Gnostic foundation to the Hermetic traditions of ancient Egypt. From its very inception, the entire civilization was focused on the initiatory path. Architecture, art, cosmologies, language, myths, even civil engineering were used by the ancient Egyptians as beacons to guide those candidates who dared to cross over to the west bank of the Nile, the land of the dead, and walk the eternal path of return. They left a legacy so powerfully sublime in its symbolism that it is still able to communicate to present and future humanities a silent message of liberation that can never be erased, only forgotten.